All right, everyone. It is college football playoff rankings reveal time. We've got one more here on a Tuesday night before we get to Selection Sunday, where we are getting down to the nitty gritty. This is very exciting stuff. As I detailed in the show with Luke last week, he's not joining us today, but he will be with us on Sunday. Um, we thought a lot of chaos was going to happen last weekend, and well, quite frankly, there wasn't a lot. Without further ado, we've got 25 to 21. James Madison joins the rankings, as does North Texas. The CFP committee is getting ready to lock a G5 team into the playoff pool. Iowa was unranked; they're not ranked, and Georgia Tech is in there as well in the top 25. They still haven't fallen. You know, they've got some. They've got a couple quality wins, or at least wins that the committee considers to be quality, but they definitely ended the season on an unfavorable stretch. You got Houston there at 21. They were back in the rankings after being unranked for a brief amount of time. Houston performed a lot better than I expected them to this season, so credit to them for that. We've got Tulane going up 4 spots. Michigan dropped 4 after losing to Ohio State. Arizona skyrockets after the win over Arizona State. Virginia goes up 1. USC goes up 1. USC is one of those teams that's just barely going to miss the playoff, despite the fact that they had a much better season than any of us expected them to. Yeah, I was expecting there to be a lot more chaos this weekend, a lot more interesting stuff, but it was kind of anticlimactic. Bama pulls it off. Ohio State destroys Michigan. Indiana destroys Purdue. Right, the only mishap really was Texas beating Texas A&M. Utah, they dropped 2 spots. Curious to see who will be at number 14. Vandy stays put. So at this point, Vanderbilt is virtually eliminated from this thing. I looked it up. They have an 11% chance to make the playoff at this point. I mean, it was a magical season for the Doors. You saw them start to pop off last season, and they only built off of that momentum that they had last season, beating Alabama and stuff, of course. This year, they only improved upon that. They're 10-2, but it's just not enough to get there with the losses to Alabama and Texas. I think it was the margin of defeat to Alabama that keeps them out as well. We've got Texas moving up 3 spots. This one could get interesting, as they're just 1 spot outside of the top 12, but you're gonna have to move a G5 team in there too. And obviously, as you're seeing here, the committee values a 2-loss Miami team over a 3-loss Texas team, despite the fact that Texas has losses to ranked Ohio State and Georgia. The Georgia loss was a blowout, and you can't lose to a sorry Florida team like that. Miami sitting there at number 12. They've got 2 unranked losses this year. Louisville, SMU. It's really inexcusable, but nonetheless, Miami still sits in there. It'll be interesting how the committee organizes them with an ACC champion, since 7-5 Duke is unranked, and Virginia is sitting down near the bottom of the top 25. Number 11 is BYU. That's an interesting occurrence there too. If BYU is to beat Texas Tech, will 2 Big 12 teams end up in the playoff? That's going to be a huge debate. I would probably lean on the side of thinking that it will. Yeah, no real movement there. They had a slow start against UCF, but eventually they took care of business on Saturday. But BYU is one of those teams. They've looked solid this year, but at times they have looked one-dimensional. So, if you can use the eye testing with Notre Dame, then you got to use it with them too. Notre Dame drops 1 spot. So Alabama is going to jump Notre Dame. That's interesting. I actually jumped Notre Dame above Alabama in my ranking. This is fascinating because they have dominated the past 2 weeks. And I thought that Alabama looked very shaky against Auburn. I know it's Jordan Hare. I know it's haunted and all that shit. But after destroying the last 2 weeks, Notre Dame dropping a spot is interesting to me. But it looks like a little switch up of energy out of the committee here. Yeah, Alabama rises a spot. I mean, the fan in me, I'd love to see that. That's fantastic. But I will, from an objective standpoint, I'll kind of push against it. Because coming from the critical Bama fan eye here, haven't had a complete performance in a long time. And I thought that fundamentally we did a lot of things wrong against Auburn this past weekend. And so putting Notre Dame at 9 and Alabama at 10, I wouldn't have necessarily been in disagreement with that. But at this point, with Alabama being at number 9, that they are essentially locked to be in the playoffs. Like that's what the committee is telling you at this point, is that Alabama is going to be in, regardless of if they win or lose against Georgia. It's really just going to be, are they going to have a home playoff game or an away playoff game, possible first round and bye. Oklahoma still sits above Alabama. I'm surprised that Oklahoma didn't move at all after that performance against LSU this past weekend. A&M drops all the way down to number 7. They dropped 4 spots. I had A&M above Tech in my ranking still, just because I couldn't penalize them much for losing a rivalry game like that. Ole Miss goes up a spot despite losing Lane Kiffin. The committee does not knock them down. I love that. Those players don't deserve to be penalized for something that their former head coach at this point did. Ole Miss has had a magical season this year. They've had an incredible season, and it would have been wrong of the CFP committee to penalize them for that. And so I'm very happy to see them still sitting there at number 6. I'm expecting Texas Tech to be at number 5. Oregon goes up a spot. They are at number 5. So Tech is going to go up to 4, I'm thinking. Maybe 3? Probably 4. I put Georgia at number 3. Okay, Texas Tech is at number 4, so I'm expecting Georgia to be at number 3. Texas Tech beat the shit out of West Virginia this weekend. All right, Georgia goes up a spot. Had a bit of a shaky game against Georgia Tech. All right, Indiana and Ohio State is going to round it out. So a couple teams are officially eliminated from playoff contention. Vanderbilt, bye-bye Vanderbilt. I mean, I looked up the other day. They had an 11% chance to make it as it was. So you'd have Alabama and Oklahoma in the rematch if things go where they are. It looks like you'll probably have Virginia or Duke going on the road to Oregon. And you would have – or no. You'd have the G5 going to Oregon. You'd have Virginia Tech or Duke going to Ole Miss. And then Texas A&M and Notre Dame with the rematch, this time in College Station. So when I look at this, I can't pick Notre Dame to go into Kyle Field and get a win. Texas A&M has just been a different beast down there this year, and I think that they just had a matchup advantage on Notre Dame last time. Even though Oklahoma was as defensively imposing as were against Alabama, I think Alabama would get their revenge up in Norman. I really do, especially after beating them the last 2 times. I don't think that lightning strikes 3 times for Alabama against Oklahoma. Oklahoma's offense was lethargic against Alabama. Hasn't looked great at all this past month, and so I think that Alabama would capitalize on that. But like I was saying, there are some teams that are officially eliminated from playoff contention. Vanderbilt is cooked. Utah is cooked, as expected. Miami is going to be the interesting case here as this week goes on, as conference championships take place. They're going to be the most interesting case here. How do they value those losses? Their strength of schedule is sitting at 44. Notre Dame's is at 42. And so the committee's slightly valuing Alabama now over Notre Dame, which I was not expecting at all. The whole world was telling me how Notre Dame looked better than Alabama a few weeks ago, and I agreed because of Notre Dame's running game. I mean, I started to become convinced. And Alabama's Iron Bowl performance, while I was happy to see a win out of my Tide, I thought it was shaky. But I guess that the committee and I don't align in our thinking there. But I'm as a Bama fan, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain at all. Looks like Texas is pretty much cooked here, and they should be with 3 losses. That Florida loss is going to continue to be a blemish on their resume. There were a couple teams that came really close this year, like USC, who performed a lot better than I expect them to this year. And with the way they've recruited going into 2026, I expect them to make even more of a push next year. And I also expect Michigan, even though they just fell short, I expect them to be back in the scene again next year. But as of right now, James Madison and North Texas, they're going to be fighting for that G5 spot. If they both win, it's going to be interesting. But I think that I would value James Madison. They look better overall this season. So that's it. As far as your rankings go, those are the teams that are out. The ones that A&M's going to be a lock. Oregon's going to be a lock. Oklahoma's a lock. Ole Miss is a lock. Tech, Ohio State, Georgia, Indiana, Alabama, they're all locks. Hello, Drover. How are you, buddy? I'm fighting a dog now on my live stream. Hello, Drover. Do you agree with the rankings? Do you think the CFP committee did a good job? Do you think they got it right? Think they got it right, buddy? I think they did. I don't have many complaints at all. I mean, I'm sure some people will be outraged. He's biting me. He must be outraged. He must not agree with something. He must think Notre Dame should be higher or something along those lines. Well, Drover, all I gotta say is roll Tide. Roll Tide. Love seeing my Tide. Get some respect here. Oh shit. All right. Okay. All right. Hey. That's enough out of you. That's enough out of you. I just want to see this before we transition. They're comparing James Madison and Duke. James Madison's strength of schedule is 118. Duke's is 74. That shows that them ACC schedules, shit. And they've got 5 losses. Before we get into this, I just want to say it would be damn crazy to see a 5-loss team get into these playoffs. I mean, shit. While you potentially have a 2-loss Miami team sitting out or a 2-loss Vanderbilt team sitting out, Clark Lee had some comments about that earlier today about how SEC teams get evaluated. And I agree. When you're playing a schedule like Vanderbilt does, you're seeing Alabama, you're seeing Texas. You're traveling to all 3 places. You're going to Bryant-Denny, DKR, and Neyland. And to have a team like Duke get in and Vandy not, I think that's still something that has to get fixed, y'all. I'm not going to lie. I think that's a bit of an issue. But without further ado, we've got predictions on the docket here as well. We're going to start this thing today. And we're going to start it with the rematch between BYU and Texas Tech taking place right down the road at AT&T Stadium. We've got John Party doing the halftime show. Love my boy John Party. They call him Mr. Saturday Night, right? Heartache medication. Love to see it. These teams played just a few weeks ago. Texas Tech dominated that matchup, 29-7. And honestly, I think they could have won by more. They had some red zone struggles in that game, and as of recent, they seem to have really polished it up. Now, are they playing some lesser opponents than BYU? Absolutely. BYU's got a really stingy defense compared to teams of the likes of West Virginia, and so I can see why they blew the doors off of them 49-0 and struggled in the red zone a little bit against BYU. They've got that kind of bend don't break defense, but there's some matchups out there that are just a mismatch from the beginning, and certain elements of teams get exposed. Like there's one that I will never forget. Back in 2020, the Las Vegas Raiders would play the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was the funniest thing because the Chiefs were so much of a better team than the Raiders. But yet, the Raiders would expose the Chiefs secondary like nothing you'd ever seen before. The Chiefs had that bend-don't-break defense back then, and the Raiders would just run up and down the field on them. I mean, these games are shootouts, like 35, 31. The Raiders would play everybody else like shit. But that game, they just had a mismatch with Kansas City. Well, Texas Tech is the better team here. And I think that they have several mismatches with this BYU Cougars team. First and foremost, I just think that Texas Tech is further on in their progression as a team right now than BYU is. Like I think that they're just further along their timeline. Texas Tech feels like an SEC team in the Big 12. BYU feels like an elite Big 12 team, but Texas Tech feels like more than that. They feel like just an SEC team in an inferior conference right now in the Big 12. Tech is a stout defense. Of course, Mr. Rodriguez has been leading that thing. He's making a Heisman campaign right now. And look, offense wins games, defense wins championships. And so he has my vote right now to go to New York. I'd probably take over Pavia. I'm not going to lie. BYU relies heavily on their run game to establish tempo and find success in these games, open up the passages on offense. Bear Bachmeier has been a good, not great quarterback. He's a freshman. He's had highs and lows this year. You know, he's had turnovers, great games, sluggish games. He's been all over the board. He was kind of a non-factor against Texas Tech a few weeks ago, as was BYU's run game. L.J. Martin really just couldn't get it going at all. And this thing on Saturday, I know you're taking it a bit south down here to Arlington. You're not in the flatness of West Texas anymore. You're now going to beautiful, quintessential Arlington, Texas, AT&T Stadium. I don't think much is going to change. I think this is just a mismatch. Tech has an underrated receiving core, too. My boy Coy Eakin out there, Reggie Virgil, Caleb Douglas. I just think there's too many mismatches on the field here for BYU to win this thing. Vegas loves Texas Tech. I think they love them for a reason. They're favoring the Red Raiders at minus 12.5 right now. And right now, I think that the mismatch continues. I think that Tech wins this thing. I think they win it big. I think they cover. Give me the Red Raiders to be your Big 12 champions and stamp their spot in the college football playoff this weekend in Arlington. And mind you, too, you know, I've got a lot of Texas Tech friends out here in DFW. Shout out to my guys. They are traveling well. They're coming from Lubbock. They're coming from all over the state. BYU will travel well, too. I mean, that's a very passionate fan base. They've got to respect it. But that stadium is going to be littered with red and black. And it's going to be loud. It's going to be Texas Tech centric. And so give me the Red Raiders to win this thing. I think that the turnout for this Big 12 championship will be much better than last year as well. I mean, this game is a salesperson's dream. Last year was Arizona State and Iowa State. I mean, those teams barely traveled. There's like 23,000 people in Jerry World. It was pathetic. This one, I think you'll definitely see closer to around 60. Love to see it. Love to see it for the folks at AT&T Stadium. All right. At Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday nights. Here comes Saturday nights. The Indiana Hoosiers and the Ohio State Buckeyes finally face off. This has been one of those hypothetical matchups that we've talked about for the past several months. I mean, you've heard Ohio State fans talk about it. You've heard Indiana fans talk about it. Everybody has an opinion on this, but these two teams, Ohio State and Indiana, they are finally playing. We're finally going to be able to settle this thing. All of the hypotheticals are going to get thrown out the window, and it's going to be mano a mano for the Big Ten crown. I can't wait to see it on Saturday. And this is the only game in my preview show here this weekend where these teams haven't played each other. Alabama, Georgia, you've seen it. Duke, Virginia, you've seen it. Texas Tech, BYU, you've seen it. You have not seen these two play each other. Ohio State fans, Indiana fans, everybody has something to say about it. Ohio State fans comment on my videos. We beat the shit out of Indiana. Go Bucks. Indiana fans, we're finally going to get ours against Ohio State. Well, we're going to finally see. Indiana, the headline this year has been that they have been destroying their opponents. They lead the FBS in win margin. It's plus 29.8 on average for the season. That is unbelievable. They're winning their games by more than 4 touchdowns a game. But it's also worth mentioning that Indiana has a strength of schedule that ranks 45th in the nation. And mind you, there's only so many teams in the Power Four, and that's on the bottom tier. So Indiana's schedule is not great. They've avoided playing Ohio State. They've avoided playing Michigan. They've avoided playing USC this year. They played Iowa. They played Illinois. They went up to Eugene and beat Oregon. That's the game that we're kind of hanging our hat on. But they struggled against Iowa. So did Oregon. They beat the brakes off of Illinois. Huge statement win. Anybody that goes up into Eugene gets a win. You get tip of the cap from me. But outside of those 3 games, it's a whole lot of Wisconsin and Purdue and UCLA, and it doesn't really prove much. So this is a massive test for Indiana this weekend. But not much more can be said about Ohio State's strength of schedule, as theirs is just below Indiana, 46th in the nation. I mean, I said it all along, I don't think Ohio State really got tested much this year. I mean, you had week 1 against Texas, who ended up not being as good as people expect them to be this year. They beat up on Illinois. They beat up on Washington. I'll give them that. And they beat up on Michigan. Road games. Tip of the cap for that. But again, never saw Oregon. Never saw USC. Never saw Indiana in the regular season. So it really feels like they have like 1 or 2 big games a year. And then all of a sudden, you hit fast forward and we're in December. It's felt that way for both of these teams. But I strongly feel like this is one of those matchups where you got to mute the TV. Go put some highlights on tonight. Mute the TV and watch both of them play. And I know that Indiana has dominated their opponents, but look at the players. Look at the speed. Look at the size. Look at the athleticism. I know it can sound kind of cliche sometimes, but I think that this mental framework applies to this matchup here. Ohio State's bringing Jeremiah Smith. They're bringing Carnell Tate. I mean, those are 2 first-round draft pick receivers. Throwing Caleb Downs in the party. You've got a Heisman candidate and Julian Sayin. They just look bigger. They look stronger. They look faster. And that's by no means any reason to discount for Fernando Mendoza or Omar Cooper Jr. or Elijah Surratt. I mean, there's some dogs on Indiana as well, but there's always one of those matchups every year that get really hyped up. It's a top 5 matchup. I mean, you've got number 1, number 2 this Saturday. This is going to be incredible. The hype behind this is going to be amazing. We're finally going to see who the top dog is. Will Indiana take that top spot? Will they overtake Ohio State? Or will it be the same olds? Will it be the usual suspects and Ohio State pulls this off? I happen to think that Ohio State is just going to overwhelm Indiana. Like I'm saying, there's always, those number 1 against number 2 matchups, number 3 against number 4, number 1 against 4, 2, 3. You get the point. Where it gets really hyped up, and then there's just this blowout massacre result. I don't think this will be exactly a massacre, but I think that's the margin of victory for Ohio State is going to be higher than Vegas indicates here. Vegas has Ohio State minus 4.5. I think Ohio State wins this thing by multiple possessions. I think they win by double digits. I'm taking the Buckeyes to win 35-23. I mean, they look dominant up in Ann Arbor this past weekend. The snow was flying. There was hard hitting going on, and yet Julian Sayin, after a drive or 2, just looked comfortable. He looked settled in. He had no problem delivering it to Brandon Inniss, to Carnell Tate, to Jeremiah Smith, and I think that Julian Sayin settles in very quickly to this game as well, and I think Fernando Mendoza has a good game as well, but that defensive line and secondary of Ohio State, that's just nasty. I think it's just going to throw some looks at Fernando Mendoza that maybe he hasn't seen it this year, and it could be a little bit of a culture shock. The one thing I'm going to say about Ohio State in this game is, and I said this about Georgia a couple of years ago before they played Alabama in the 2021 SEC Championship, Ohio State hasn't gotten punched in the mouth much this year. And so, if so help me God, Indiana goes up 10-0 at some point in the first quarter. How does Ohio State respond? Do they tuck the tail between their legs? Do they shrivel up because they haven't seen the kind of adversity before? Or do they find that second gear like they did against Penn State last year? Close the gap and take the lead. It'll be a test of Ohio State's character. It'll be a test of both these teams' characters respectively in this game. But that's my one chief concern. Is because Ohio State hasn't faced much adversity this year. If Indiana punches them in the mouth early, how do they respond? I think this team is still resilient. Like usually you have a little bit of complacency kick in the year following a national championship. Haven't really seen it of Ohio State yet. They've had some slow starts, so I could see Indiana taking the lead quickly as Indiana had started these games faster. But ultimately, I like Ohio State to win this thing by 2 scores. Okay. Another rematch here. Duke and Virginia in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium. And no, this isn't for basketball. This was a basketball ACC championship a few years ago. But no, this is football. Virginia won the prior matchup 34-17. And just like the Big 12 championship, I don't really expect much different here. Just because you're moving to another stadium, I don't think much is going to change here. In the last game, a key to victory for Virginia was that they exposed Duke's defensive line, and they exposed it bad. Jamari Taylor went off. He had 133 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and Terrell Harris had 161 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. So on many fronts, Virginia just exposed Duke. Duke was not moving the ball nearly as well as they were against other opponents this year. Against Virginia, Virginia's defensive front can be nasty at times. They can keep games low scoring. They take that hold on. You struggle to move the ball against them. I will say the one advantage that Duke has on Virginia is their quarterback. I think that Darian Mensah is a better quarterback than Chandler Morris. Chandler Morris is one of those boom or bust guys. I mean, for every touchdown, he throws an interception. He takes risks. He's lived by the sword. He's died by the sword. Darian Mensah is a great dual threat quarterback. His arm is great. He's accurate, but man, he can move. He's shifty as well. And so I think that Darian Mensah can keep Duke in this thing. And even though Duke has that quarterback advantage on Virginia, I still like Virginia in every other facet here. A couple other keys to victory that Virginia had in the last matchup. They won time of possession. That has to be part of their strategy this Saturday. Hold on to the ball, have long drives, just wear Duke down physically. And they were remarkable on third down. Duke was atrocious on third down against Virginia a few weeks ago. I think that Virginia's strengths match up great with Duke's weaknesses. And so for that reason, Vegas favors the Hoos once again by 3.5. And I like Virginia to win this thing as well. I like them to win 30-20, 10-point margin. I think they win. I think they cover. Do we have a chance at a 7-5 team getting into the CFP? Yes. Would that be fucking insane? Absolutely. Is it going to happen? I don't necessarily think so. Give me Virginia to win this thing. All right. Fate decides this thing once again. The Reds clash one more time. The Riley Green matchup. She's all Alabama but stuck on Georgia time. We're back here again. The prime teams of the SEC. The gold standard of the best conference in the land. Alabama, Georgia. For a while, we were thinking this thing would be Alabama, Texas A&M, or Georgia, Texas A&M, or maybe Ole Miss even squeaking it in there if Alabama were to lose the Iron Bowl. And let me tell you, that puppy came close, but it didn't happen. The Tide found a way to win again, and so once again, history repeats itself. Like Kenny Chesney says, the more things change, the more they stay the same. there's three constants in life: death, taxes, and Alabama and Georgia playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for an SEC title. Now, like I said, that puppy was close in Jordan Hare this past weekend. As an Alabama fan, I was happy to escape Jordan Hare once again with another win, but I'm also very honest with myself when I say that it was not a complete game at all for the Tide. I think that Alabama does a lot of things that holds them back from complete performances. Alabama can be imposing on offense, but then they can also dry up for periods of time. You saw that in the late second quarter and into the third quarter for Alabama, and it let Auburn back into the game. I think a lot of it had to do with play calling as well. The run game was working. And then Ryan Grubb came on the board. They wanted to start getting cute with the play calling and start to throw some of those trick plays out there. Auburn sniffed them out. They started to gain momentum. They spoon-fed momentum to Auburn. You cannot spoon-feed momentum to Georgia. But with that said, so far, Alabama under Kalen DeBoer has struggled with unranked teams, has struggled with teams that they shouldn't struggle against. It feels very 2013 Steelers to me. You know, you'll have a matchup with a playoff team. You play out of your minds. You have a matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 3-8, and it comes out in the last minute, or you'll lose. That's been the tale of Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. They're going to play up to Georgia. Kalen DeBoer is not 2-0 against Georgia for no reason. They're going to be prepared out of their minds for this thing, and they're going to play up to Georgia just like they did in Athens back in September when these teams face each other. Alabama, of course, has owned Georgia over the past decade and a half. It's just one of those things. Sometimes there's teams out there who have your number, and so that is absolutely something to take into account here. It's also worth noting that this is a bragging rights game. As far as a playoff outcome goes, we saw that in the college football playoff rankings reveal. With Alabama being at number 9, they are a lock for the playoffs. Georgia at 3, they are a lock for the playoffs as well. So this game has no impact on either of these teams' playoff stocks. It really just decides if Alabama is going to be playing a road playoff game or playing at home or maybe even having a bye or Georgia having a bye. That's all this is going to decide. So this is just bragging rights. But let me tell you something. As an Alabama fan, we border Georgia. I still want to own that state. And so both fan bases, both Alabama and Georgia, regardless of what stakes are involved in this game, that's not what matters. It's the point of owning your border state. You take this shit personally. And every player, every coach, every assistant will on Saturday. So I broke down Alabama a little bit. Like they went on that streak of beating 4 ranked teams in a row, captured the nation's attention, but then struggled against South Carolina, struggled against LSU, lost to Oklahoma, puzzling game, and had kind of an up and down rocky performance against Auburn. Ty Simpson hasn't looked himself in a while, but I will say that clutch touchdown pass in the end of the fourth quarter towards the end of the fourth quarter when Kalen DeBoer bet the mortgage on Ty Simpson on that offense. I think that sometimes gambles like that can insert a certain confidence in your offense, a spark that didn't have before. I kept saying Alabama needs a spark. I think they may have gotten it there. And so even though that offense has looked kind of sluggish in past weeks, I think you can see a different version of it just because of confidence being sparked from that play call. The Georgia, for a while, looked like one of the hottest teams in college football, going into Starkville, going into Davis-Wade, beating up on Mississippi State, beating the shit out of Texas. Then they played Georgia Tech, and they had kind of an underwhelming game on the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, they were elite, holding the Yellow Jackets, who can have a pretty good offense at times, to just 9 points. So defensively, they look great. Georgia has found its identity with its defensive line, with its run game. Love Zachariah Branch, right? Love London Humphreys. Gunnar Stockton can be up and down. If he is on, look out. But if he has kind of an off day like yet against Georgia Tech, then I expect Alabama to win this thing once again. Alabama did a great job at containing Gunnar Stockton in their matchup in Athens back in September. And I think they can do it again. Got to expect a big day out of Jan Pierre. Got to expect a big day out of Tim Keenan. Love the way Xavier Brown has been developing, Bray Hubbard. And for the first time, we want to know Alabama kind of found its rushing attack against Auburn. Unfortunately, Jam Miller got hurt, and I hope he gets better as swiftly as possible. But I expect Mr. Daniel Hill to get going this weekend, and I want to see some AK Deer. Not going to lie, I want to see some AK Deer at times this weekend. It's the same exact scenario that we saw 2 years ago. Alabama going into Jordan-Hare, having a scare. Didn't take 4th and 31 this time. A little more anticlimactic this time, but there's still a scare. You got Georgia coming into this thing. Georgia's favored right now by 2.5. Georgia was favored in that game back in 2023 as well. But I think you're going to have the same result as that game in 2023. I'm taking the Tide, because why wouldn't I? I will take them until proven wrong in this game. This is very much Chiefs and Bills here. I'm gonna take Mahomes and the Chiefs over Allen and the Bills in the playoffs until proven wrong. I'm taking Alabama over Georgia until proven wrong. And I know that there's the optics of when these teams see each other twice. Georgia saw Alabama twice in 2021. Got destroyed in the SEC championship, but in the Natty they got theirs. Alabama's 2 best receivers got hurt in that game as well. Just saying. In this rematch, I like Alabama though. And Alabama just really has to copy-paste the game plan from Sanford Stadium. Generate some turnovers, make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable, and control time of possession. Time of possession is going to be huge on Saturday. Draw out those drives. The Alabama has done that in every game this year because Alabama can physically wear you down, and they know that. If Alabama can play a complete game of football here, minimize mental mistakes, right? Minimize mental mistakes. Play your brand of football. Play clean football. And execute when it's time to execute. No empty drives. If you get down to the red zone, don't turn the ball over. Don't miss a damn field goal. And really try to get 7. If Alabama can play a complete game here, I think that Alabama overall, from a roster standpoint, is a better team than Georgia. They're not second in the nation in blue chips for no reason. This is an Alabama team that at times has performed below its potential, but I don't think they're going to this Saturday. They always play up to Georgia, and I expect them to do the same. Alabama winning this thing 31-27. That's my prediction. All right, everyone. That's the show here. We are rounding up on 40 minutes. We don't have Luke, so we're not going as long today, but we've got exciting weekends. We've got CFP Selection Sunday coming up. We have conference championships coming up. But in the meantime, I have not a Sunday steak, not a Monday steak, but a Tuesday steak to devour here because I wasn't home on Sunday. I was in upstate New York with my boys. Yesterday I was traveling. So today, it's time for steak. Y'all know I love my steak. Thank you all for watching today. Have a great day. Enjoy the weekends. Luke and I will see you on Sunday morning for Selection Sunday. But until then, have a great night.